Hey guys, welcome back to our channel for another marvelous video. The underbelly of Gotham City isn't simply filled with the usual suspects of anarchy. You know, I'm talking about the Jokers and the Penguins. This grim city is actually a womb for some of the most bizarre, inventive, and flat-out unique villains ever created in comic book history. From twisted masterminds to misunderstood outcasts, Batman's rogues gallery is as diverse as it is deadly. Today, we take a deeper look at the lesser-known but equally intriguing villains who test Batman in ways only a few can fathom. Get ready as we explore 22 of the most unique and underrated villains who have contributed to the growing legend of the Caped Crusader. Let's begin. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Mr. Bloom. Mr. Bloom represents one of the most unsettling and unique villains to rise up within Batman's rogues gallery in recent years. Having been introduced by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo during their Batman run in 2015, Mr. Bloom symbolizes the deep-lying corruption and desolation that is infused within Gotham City, taking the terror of the Batman mythos to areas that haven't been explored before. Adding to this even more is the mystery of Mr. Bloom's actual identity. Nobody knows his real name. He made his first appearance in the Super Heavy story arc, right after Batman Endgame, where in the end, Batman was missing and presumed dead, and Jim Gordon had taken up the mantle of the Bat in a mechanized Batsuit. At this point, Bloom appears and masquerades as a new kind of criminal who pitches seeds to ordinary people, giving them temporary superpowers but at a terrible cost. These seeds are a dark reflection of Gotham's desperation, as they physically and mentally corrupt everyone who uses them, frequently leading to gruesome deaths. Though slender in build, Mr. Bloom is a man with incredible strength. He recovers from otherwise lethal wounds, which involve being shot in the head and blasted through buildings. He's capable of controlling his body and growing it, wherein he attains giant size from that of a human within a moment. His fingers extend into sharp claws, whereby he can stab opponents at both close and relatively long range. He's also technologically savvy. Once he used a transmitter to assume control of nearby robotics, and he can channel electric and pyrokinetic energy through his fingers. Beyond his personal powers, Mr. Bloom has access to a line of high-tech seeds, as I mentioned before, which, when implanted into others, grant them supernatural powers. However, these seeds can be remotely amplified to deliver a lethal dose of radiation that kills the host. What really differentiates Mr. Bloom from the other Batman villains is his embodiment of Gotham's social disintegration. Quite contrary to traditional rogues powered by personal vendettas or crimes of scheming, Mr. Bloom wraps up the existential crisis of the city, a sense of hopelessness and blind anger that's brewing within its denizens. He's also quite an interesting character physically, very tall, lean, with a skeletal structure and the floral mask imparting almost extraterrestrial characteristics to him. Some people think the design is based on Slender Man. Most interestingly, Mr. Bloom was actually designed as an anti-Joker, particularly created to contrast with Jim Gordon's Batman. While part of the mystique of the Joker lies in his undefined past, Bloom's charisma is taken further by the idea that he might be anybody, making him even more terrifying. Professor Pig. Professor Pig, real name Laszlo Valentine, is undoubtedly one of the most twisted and disturbing Batman villains ever. He was created by Grant Morrison and artist Andy Kubert. The character first appeared in Batman issue 666 in 2007. 2 years later, he was presented as a recurring character in the mainstream DC universe from Batman and Robin issue 1. He quickly rose to infamy for his grotesque and nightmarish methods, embodying a new level of horror within Gotham City. Professor Pig is a crazy surgeon and scientist who strives to perfect things. His alias, Pig, is derived from the name of the mythic Pygmalion, who sculpted a perfect statue before falling in love with it. This drives Valentine to horrific extremes in the name of perfection, as he tries to fix people by making them mindless Dollatrons, humans who have undergone surgery to take on doll-like faces and are stripped of their identities. Batman Incorporated, Leviathan Strikes, expounds on his backstory, especially his origin. Laszlo Valentine had started out as a scientist working for a rather corrupt United Nations agency called Spiral. His road to insanity began when some sort of product drove him insane, making him experience portions of Alzheimer's disease. This course of events in the long run drew him into paranoid schizophrenia, spiraling into drug abuse and self-inflicted surgeries until he became a grotesque creature known as Professor Pig. What makes Professor Pig particularly horrendous is his brutal idea of beauty. Unlike most of the other villains Batman faces, motivated by power, revenge, or madness, Pig finds motivation in this warped desire to imprint his ideal image onto everybody else, regardless of how much they may hurt. His methods are grotesque. We're talking about brutal surgeries, twisting his victims into into almost unrecognizable monstrosities. What's uniquely frightening about Pig is the mix of surgical precision and unhinged mania that makes him a version of science as much as of art. Although Pig has no superhuman powers, his genius-level intellect and surgical skills make him a dangerous and deadly adversary. He's an accomplished chemist and medicinal expert, known to concoct mind-altering drugs and execute very complex surgeries. Creator Grant Morrison called Professor Pig one of the weirdest, most insane characters in the Batman universe. In fact, Pig was originally just a one-off character, but he gained an instant fanbase as his concept proved to be so chilling, and he became one of the more memorable Batman villains. Beyond comic books, it's his portrayals in the Arkham video game series and Gotham that have really solidified this villain as one of the most unnerving Batman has ever had to deal with.
Calendar Man.
Calendar Man! Calendar Man?
Calendar Man. Among the more outlandish members of the Batman's Rogues Gallery, Calendar Man, as his name suggests, has an obsession with dates and pretty much the entire calendar. Created by Bill Finger and Sheldon Moldoff, he was first introduced in Detective Comics issue 259 in 1958. Once a gimmick villain, Calendar Man has slowly evolved to become a much darker and psychologically disturbing character. Julian Gregory Day is a criminal genius whose crimes are carefully based on dates, holidays, or seasons. Even his name is a play on the calendar, with Julian and Gregory referring to the Julian and Gregorian calendars. In his first appearances, he was presented as a theme villain specializing in thematic costumes and crimes. His early appearances tended toward light-hearted and even campy. However, his modern adaptations have fleshed out his character to make him far more sinister. What makes Calendar Man so unique is his obsession with time and dates, which becomes the trademark for every crime he commits. After all, he doesn't commit crimes, he orchestrates them as rituals to nights of special meaning. This obsession with time gives his character almost ritualistic and compulsive dimensions, elevating him above the rank of common criminals. In later portrayals, Calendar Man is depicted as a brilliant strategist who's very wise about the psychological impact dates can have and uses them to manipulate and terrorize his victims. One of Calendar Man's most major storylines was in Batman: The Long Halloween, where he fulfills a Hannibal Lecter-esque role, providing Batman with cryptic clues about Holiday, a serial killer committing his crimes around specific dates. Though he has no superpowers per se, Calendar Man does boast high intellect, careful planning, and knowledge of history and calendars like no one else. He even concocts crimes that require precision and insight into the human psyche, with the help of which he's able to exploit events associated with dates and holidays for his purposes, giving him a rather rare psychological advantage over his victims and even Batman. Onomatopoeia stands out as one of the weirdest, most mysterious Batman villains, identified by his unnerving habit of mimicking sounds during his crimes. Onomatopoeia was created by Kevin Smith and Phil Hester, first appearing in Green Arrow issue 12 in 2002 before crossing Batman's path. If you've seen Batman Caped Crusader, you'll probably recognize this character. This villain's secret identity is fantastically well concealed, thereby increasing his mystique as that of a practiced assassin of non-superpowered vigilantes, such as Batman and Green Arrow as his favored targets. What really sets him apart, though, is his way of verbally saying out the sound of the action he's performing. For example, bang when firing a gun, or splat when somebody's been hit. This does sound comical, but trust me, it doesn't underscore how cold-blooded and calculating a man he really is. Onomatopoeia has no superhuman powers, but is a brilliant marksman and hand-to-hand combatant. He has experience with most weapons. To him, however, the most significant of these characteristics would have to be the ability to always remain nameless and faceless. He's extremely intelligent and can outsmart everyone by using their weaknesses and predicting their actions. What makes Onomatopoeia special is his ability to blend into the shadows of Gotham. The mimicry of sounds through fighting adds another layer of eeriness to an already standoffish character, making the attack seem very theatrical. His lack of powers makes him much more grounded and real of a threat, as he works with a strategic mind and deadly precision to take down targets. Onomatopoeia's impact was felt in the Batman Cacophony storyline, wherein he had a rather violent altercation with Batman while attempting to kill another villain, the Joker. This storyline pretty much introduces how Onomatopoeia is drastically efficient and can stand up against Gotham's finest detective. Now that he's appeared in Caped Crusader, we can hope to see more of him in future Batman projects. Anarchy. Anarchy is one of the ideologically driven villains in Batman's Rogues Gallery, pitting himself against the Dark Knight in physical confrontations and philosophical and moral debates. Brought to life by Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle, Anarchy first made his appearance in Detective Comics issue 608 back in 1989. Since then, this character's evolved into a symbol of rebellion and anti-establishment sentiment, representing a more radical mindset within Gotham City's broad and diverse stock of villains. Anarchy is the alias of Lonnie Macon, a teenage prodigy with an astoundingly bright mind, unmatched wit and superb insight into social justice. Feeling the system is broken and disillusioned about corruption and inequality in society, Lonnie dons the alter ego Anarchy to fight against this dysfunctional system. What sets him apart is the level of intellectualism and ideology in his crimes. He doesn't aim for personal gains or create chaos just for the sake of chaos, but engages in crime as a means to an end. This villain was known to engage Batman on issues of justice, freedom, and government, battling the very foundation on which Batman operated. This makes Anarchy one of the very few and actually seasoned rivals to Batman, with his motivations being sincerely held in reforming society, though certainly misguided. One of Anarchy's most seminal storylines is the Anarchy in Gotham City storyline, where he goes on a spree of attacks against the symbols of corruption throughout Gotham, from corporate offices to government buildings. More than anything, this proves just how committed Anarchy is to his cause and will do anything to make it happen, even if he must turn into what he hates, a criminal. Although Anarchy doesn't have superhuman powers or abilities, his intellect and strategic mind are so brilliant that he represents a serious threat. He's a master hacker, robotician, and chemist who puts cutting-edge technology at his service. He's even got the ability to hold his own in hand-to-hand fighting, although by and large he relies on brains and planning to outmaneuver enemies. High-tech gadgets and weapons of his own design usually give him the edge over Batman and other authorities. Anarchy showed the Batman universe that he symbolized rebellion and anti-establishment thought, depicting more radical and extreme ways of social activism. The character challenges this established hero-villain dynamic because, while his motives are noble, his methods quite often are not. Polka Dot Man. Of all the Batman villains, Polka Dot Man is surely one of the more fanciful and weird ones, being fantastically colorful in his appearance and sporting an arsenal of rather wacky weaponry. Created by Bill Finger and Sheldon Moldoff, the character first saw the light of day in Detective Comics issue 300 in 1962. As can be deduced, the spur-of-the-moment nature of his gimmick makes him sound silly. Still, over the years, the Polka Dot Man has been reinvented into a tragic, intricate, and highly complex character with a set of incomparable powers at his hands. The Polka Dot Man, whose alias was Abner Krill, had been a petty crook in Gotham City. As he felt somewhat underappreciated and unsuccessful, Krill turned to costumed crime and donned a suit covered in polka dots. Each dot on his suit would turn into a different weapon or gadget, be it a buzzsaw or a flying saucer, among other weird contraptions. It was this weird gimmick that set him apart from most of the villains and earned him his place on our list today. With these dots, he's shown great skill in using them to surprise and outsmart his foes, making him a very resourceful and versatile adversary. While having no superhuman powers himself, the creativity of the gadgets and an understanding of their tactical applications made him one of the great foes of Batman and other heroes. What really makes him tick is that he's able to turn even something as banal as polka dots into deadly tools, underlining his ingenuity and somewhat surrealistic flair to his character. Throughout the years, he's been convincingly portrayed as a somewhat tragic figure, bringing out absurdity and a sense of futile rage that seem to underline his criminal enterprises, further fleshing out his persona. The case of Polka Dot Man illustrates all the imagination and depth contained within the Batman universe. His thematic elements and armaments make him a visually striking villain, while the background pathos brings poignancy into his stories. More significantly, his depiction in the movie The Suicide Squad gave the character fresh popularity and a new appreciation, underlining the potential for audiences to take a liking to even the most unconventional villains. Victor Zsasz. Victor Zsasz is one of Batman's most sadistic foes, known for his gruesome and ritualistic approach to murders. Created by Alan Grant and Norm Breyfogle, he first appeared in Batman Shadow of the Bat issue 1 in 1992, while his origin story was narrated 4 years later in the Batman Chronicles issue 3. What sets Zsasz apart from most other enemies is that he doesn't need some sort of extreme, intricate plot or theme. His terror is located simply in his pure, naked psychopathy. Victor Zsasz was once the heir to a powerful, wealthy family, living a life of luxury and entitlement. However, following a streak of personal tragedies, his parents dying and losing everything financially on a gamble, he was sent over the edge. He sank into depression before finally resolving to kill himself. It was in one of those aha moments, either of clarity or madness, that he killed a vagrant who was trying to mug him. This particular incident seemed to light something within Zsasz, providing him with a twisted purpose in life. From this point, Zsasz takes up the responsibility to free others from the drudgery of living. He dedicated himself then to killing as many people as possible, marking each kill by a tally mark etched into his own skin. Another villain on our list with no superpowers, Zsasz is a really good martial artist and a skilled assassin. His unpredictable and unafraid nature makes him a force in any brawl with Batman. He's fast, agile, and deadly in wielding a blade, his weapon of choice for finishing off victims. However, his primary weapon is his crazy mind, which allows him to outthink and outmaneuver opponents. His knowledge of human psychology empowers him to really make fear run down the spines of his victims and pursuers. In Batman: The Last Arkham, he was one of the core inmates housed within the walls of the infamous Arkham Asylum. His escape and ensuing murder spree set Batman to the test regarding his morality and methods. Compared to most of the colorful theatrical villains in Gotham City, Victor's Art definitely depicts the extreme diversity that can be found within Batman's list of villains. He's a character who puts readers back into the reality of crime and its psychological effects on its victims. His appearances in every medium, from comic books and animated series to video games, has forever sealed his place as one of the Dark Knight's more jarring enemies. Ventriloquist. The ventriloquist, Arnold Wesker, is probably one of the more psychologically complex and unique villains within Batman's gallery of bad guys. Created by John Wagner, Alan Grant, and Norm Breyfogle, his first appearance was in the pages of Detective Comics issue 583 in 1988. His defining characteristic is his reliance on his dummy, Scarface, who holds his violent and aggressive personality. Arnold Wesker was bred in a prominent family belonging to organized crime. However, everything started to take a toll on his life after he witnessed his mother being killed at the hands of the goons of a rival family. This traumatizing experience gave birth to dissociative identity disorder, wherein his hidden rage and craving for supremacy assumed the form of a wooden dummy, which he christened a Scarface. With time passing, this became Wesker's only outlet, and he let everything out, all his turbulence and built-up aggression, through Scarface. The puppet, carved to look like a classic mafia boss like Al Capone, who had the same nickname, stood for the reality of all that hidden anger and aggression within Wesker. Though Wesker has no superpowers, he has excellent skills in ventriloquism and puppet manipulation. Scarface himself is, of course, an inanimate object, but it's often outfitted with weapons ranging from firearms to other weapons that Wesker wields with deadly precision. That's enough to make Wesker a confident foe, given the fact that he manages to accurately project his voice and move Scarface's mouth and body as he wishes. He can also be doubly menacing and much more dangerous due to his twisted split personality and the unpredictability of his attacks. The ventriloquist has surfaced in various incarnations where other characters took up the mantle, like Peyton Riley and Shauna Belzer. These variations indicate how flexible the ventriloquist really is, and how the character is more permanently bound to an interest in diving into the darker corners of the human mind. Duella Dent. One of the more shadowy figures in Batman's Rogues Gallery is that of Duella Dent, a shrouded figure whose identity is cast in mystery and flux. Identified by her affiliation with different villainous personas, Duella's real past and exact motivations have been the subject of intrigue and confusion throughout the years. Created by Bob Rozakis, she first appeared in Batman Family issue 6 in 1976. Duella Dent first introduced herself as the Joker's daughter, announcing that she was the daughter of Batman's #1 arch-nemesis. Not long afterward, she claimed herself as the daughter of other major villains like Catwoman, Penguin, Scarecrow, and Riddler. It was then revealed at last that her father was actually Two-Face, Harvey Dent. This revelation added more depth to her already complex character as she struggled with her identity and stepping out of her father's shadow. Through all her many incarnations, Duella has suffered waves of mental instability and a need for attention that's driven her to ally herself with heroes and villains alike. In the Teen Titans series, she joined the team as Harley Quinn. Her time with the Titans had ups and downs, from not being able to fit in to finally showing her deeper problems, all out of a desire for attention. Another major plot thread is found in Countdown to Final Crisis, where Duella becomes a tragic character whose end comes extremely prematurely at the hands of Solomon, a monitor. These story arcs underline her continuing struggle with identity and her confused relationship with heroism and villainy. What makes Duella Dent special is her fluid identity and her penchant for taking on the personas of different villains. Her constantly shifting veneer, therefore, allows her to move unpredictably and with a lot of imagination within Gotham's underworld. Her ability to shift between identities is indicative of deep psychological problems and her quest for self-definition. This identity crisis and her attempts to forge a link with the heroes and villains make her an interesting and multi-dimensional character in the Batman universe. Although Duella has no superhuman powers, she's skilled in combat and gymnastics and is therefore trained to take care of herself in hand-to-hand fighting. She has wits for brains, is sharp and resourceful, and can always outmaneuver her enemies and improvise in any circumstance. Because of this unpredictability and her role-blending ability, Duella is a dangerous opponent to Batman and his allies. The Designer. The Designer is one of Batman's relatively new rogues. The character is portrayed as a genius and an enigmatic person who understands the deepest psyche of a criminal. Created by James Tynion IV and Jorge Jimenez, the Designer first appeared in the 2020 publication of Batman Volume 3, Issue 90. His deep plans and maneuvering of other rogues place him in a very different and formidable territory as a villain in league with the Dark Knight. In his youth, the Designer was the sworn enemy of the vigilante detective Cassandra Wycliffe Baker, who would later become a mentor to Bruce Wayne. Obsessed Tasked with defeating Cassandra, the designer spent years developing himself as a criminal genius in their constant battle. No matter how skillful and ingenious his plans might be, Cassandra always seemed to defeat him, which eventually drove the designer to the brink of madness. After 2 decades of unremitting failure, the designer shut himself up in a room for 1 year to think out a plan of action which has sidestepped all the conventional rules of their cat-and-mouse game. A year later, he re-emerged, defeated and broke his old foe, Cassandra. This victory put the designer on the road to greater crimes, quite literally becoming an urban legend to criminals, as the supposed mastermind behind some of humanity's greatest, never-heard-of crimes. His ambition finally brought him to Gotham City in an attempt to challenge himself against the wits of the city's most infamous villains like the Joker and Riddler. He felt that any bad guy could achieve greatness if only he kept his own demons and weaknesses at bay. So, he came up with a vast scheme to bring all of their criminal activities to a whole new level. His downfall occurred when he encountered the Joker. How Joker's twisted mind worked and how he reveled in chaos brought forth the limitations of the designer. The encounter ended with the Joker killing him. The designer's greatest abilities are his intellect and strategic thinking. He can be considered a master planner of complex schemes, which are needlessly intricate with redundancies, fallbacks, and multiple layers. He assesses easily and quickly what his enemies will do, and his charismatic leadership enables him to recruit all sorts of villains to orchestrate his plans. He further uses a mysterious gas capable of reanimating the dead and using them like puppets. While not much of a physical fighter himself, the designer holds so much sway and has such great access to resources that he becomes a powerful and dangerous figure within Gotham's criminal underworld. What makes the designer so unique is his approach toward crime and the ability to orchestrate elaborate plans, exploiting the weaknesses of heroes and villains. In contrast, most of Batman's villains depend on force or gimmicks, while the designer acts from the back end, manipulating things for the desired result. With this deep insight into Gotham's criminal psychology, he may foresee and counter Batman's strategies, which is what makes him such a strong rival. It's great to see more fresh characters emerge in the world of the Dark Knight, especially the ones who use their brains instead of just meaningless brawling. Mad Hatter. It's time to talk about one of Batman's earliest villains on our list today. The Mad Hatter is definitely one of Batman's most bizarre and psychologically complicated enemies, who's captured the interest of fans over the course of time because of his strange mix of obsession and criminal genius. Created by Bob Kane, Lou Schwartz, and Bill Finger, his first appearance was in the 1948 issue 49 of Batman. Jervis Tetch was a brilliant neuroscientist and an inventor. During his early years, Jarvis had built a strong fascination with the well-known literary works of Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and its follow-up Through the Looking Glass. Because of this interest, he began to connect with the Mad Hatter's name and persona, forming his identity and criminal career around this fantastical figure. His infatuation with Carroll's books and his sense of never being able to blend in with society led him to take on the moniker of Mad Hatter and dress in a costume meant to seem like the crazy outfits of that character. One of the more memorable storylines featuring the Mad Hatter is in a major arc on Batman Haunted Night, where he kidnaps Barbara Gordon and other children to create his own twisted version of Wonderland. This underlines how deep Tetch's madness goes. The primary weapon of Tetch lies in his mastery of mind control technology. He fashions numerous devices, such as hats and other types of headgear, which transmit signals capable of altering brain waves, generally turning his victims into mindless drudge workers. Other than this, he has a sharp mind and is a keen psychologist who uses this to his advantage in exploiting the weaknesses of different people. Also, since he's quite small in stature, it allows for him to be nimble and elusive. What's made the Mad Hatter so unique is the way he merged his passion for literature with his criminal IQ. His love for the Alice in Wonderland books shows up even in his crimes, many of which have been framed around its themes and characters. With his mind-controlling powers and fanciful, sinister personality, he embodies a very singular and unpredictable threat to Gotham City. The next person on our list made their debut before the Hatter. Who's that? Dr. Death. Dr. Death is one of the very earliest villains of Batman, known for his sinister medical skills and inhuman experiments. Not much is known about Dr. Death's origin, except that he was a genius scientist whose real name was Carl Helfern. At one point in his life, Helfern decided to use his genius for evil purposes. Dr. Death made his first appearance in the third story about Batman, written by Gardner Fox, with drawings by Bob Kane. That really set him up as a more prominent villain. In his inaugural tale, in Detective Comics issue 29, released in 1939, Dr. Death plotted to use his chemical weapons to extort money from Gotham City's elite by staging a series of deadly attacks to force compliance. Batman intervenes to stop his plan, showcasing the Dark Knight's early confrontations with sophisticated and scientific threats. Dr. Death stands out as the first traditional supervillain Batman ever battled and his first recurring adversary. While Dr. Death hasn't been focused on much over the years recently, the early stories he featured in certainly set up the groundwork for the intellectual-type criminals that are pretty common in Gotham nowadays. Dr. Death is an amazingly gifted scientist and chemist. His skill allows him to concoct and use innumerable chemical weapons, from powerful toxins and deadly gases to other contrivances that can cause extreme damage. Later, besides his scientific knowledge, Dr. Death gains superpowers from the experiments he conducted. He gets blessed with superhuman strength and stamina and becomes capable of super regeneration. Helped by those experiments, he manages to recover even from bone-fracturing injuries. However, the healing process often results in grotesque and upsetting wounds. This cocktail of physiological powers with knowledge of science has really brewed him into quite the villain, wouldn't you say? The character of Dr. Death symbolizes the perils of scientific hubris and poses the ethical dilemmas created by those who seek knowledge without moral constraint. He'll always be remembered as the earliest of Batman's rogues, thus setting a stage for those future villains who would mix brains with tech into their crimes. Jane Doe. Jane Doe is a rather spooky and quite unique nemesis in Batman's crazy list. This character had an obsession with identity theft and transformation. She was created by Dan Slott and Ryan Sook and first appeared in Arkham Asylum Living Hell, issue 1 in 2003. Jane Doe has no known true identity or origin, as she's deleted all possible traces of her past. She's very meticulous and methodical with the lives she takes on. Doe studies her victims intensely for their mannerisms, speech, and behaviors and kills them to wear their skin, quite literally. Her obsession with becoming someone else comes from a deep-seated psychological need to get away from her own identity. Her talent to imitate others has been employed in a number of scenarios to create confusion and mayhem. In Arkham Asylum Living Hell, she makes her way into the asylum by posing as a therapist named Dr. Ann Carver. This provides the groundwork for a dramatic confrontation with Batman. In this storyline, one can see that she's psychologically very sharp. She's able to manipulate inmates and staff alike. She's exceptionally good at disguising, impersonating, and mentally manipulating people. Jane Doe can get into any situation by keenly observing the features that define her victims and imitating them. Also, let's not forget that she's level-headed, athletic, and powerful enough to defeat a victim by sheer force if need be. Moreover, she's been evading arrest several times due to her sharp wits and tactful thinking. What makes Jane Doe so special is her peculiar modus operandi and the ability to convincingly impersonate the targeted victims. Her changes don't pertain merely to the physical aspects, but also to the psychological, for she totally immerses herself in the lives of those she wants to duplicate to the point that she actually becomes identical to them. That makes her a pretty dangerous and unpredictable threat to Gotham City, because she could potentially infiltrate into any social circle or organization. Her methods and motivations darkly reflect the human psyche and selfhood. Since her rather recent introduction, Jane Doe has indeed left an almost indelible mark upon the Batman mythos as a grim reminder of the perils involved in losing oneself in the quest of becoming somebody else. Punchline. While a good deal of Batman's villains were created back in the day, some of the more recent and really interesting ones comprise Punchline, a dark, hazardous counterpart to Harley Quinn. Created by James Tynion IV and Jorge Jimenez, Punchline first appeared in 2020's Batman Volume 3, issue 89. A criminology undergraduate student, Alexis Kay, was swept up by the Joker's philosophy and chaos. What had begun as fascination spiraled into obsession, which evolved into twisted admiration that finally turned her into a stalker in search of the Joker. Adopting the name Punchline, she eventually manages to become the Joker's devoted sidekick and partner in crime, bringing a new streak of cold-bloodedness and acumen to the Clown Prince of Crime's activities. Punchline did make a real difference in the Joker War storyline, but she played a cardinal role in the Joker's crusade against Batman and Gotham. Her tactical acumen and staunch loyalty to the Joker raised the stakes of their fight to really test both Batman and his allies. The way Punchline clashed with Harley Quinn and Catwoman, even defeating them, really speaks volumes about her formidable presence and making her a long-term problem for the Dark Knight. She was trained in several styles of martial arts and was proficient with any weapon. In addition to being deadly in hand-to-hand fighting, Punchline is a professional manipulator who uses her wit to outfox her enemies in accomplishing complex plans. She's also highly knowledgeable about poisons and chemicals and formulates her deadliest brews. Punchline is almost a dark mirror to Harley Quinn, with none of the latter's whimsy or sense of humor. She's cold, calculating, and unflinchingly brutal. She represents the more malign aspects of the Joker's influence. This devotion is driven by a belief in his idealistic anarchism rather than a romantic attachment, making her a much more dangerous and focused villain. Punchline's ascendance in the Batman universe has come to stand for everlasting chaos against forces of order. With her role as a player in the Joker's plans, she cements a place for herself in Gotham's dark underbelly. Flamingo. Given his flamboyant appearance and ruthless cannibalistic tendencies, Flamingo can be considered to be Batman's most colorful yet daunting opponent. Created by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely, Flamingo first appeared in Batman issue 666 in 2007. Eduardo Flamingo used to be a normal person, but everything changed when he became connected with the Mob criminal organization. They abducted him and trained him to be a deranged serial murderer who cannibalizes his victims. They brainwashed Flamingo into killing his whole family, and he now works as a hitman with a flawless assassination record. Probably the most memorable appearance of Flamingo was in the Batman and Robin series, where he was hired to kill the Red Hood. The fight between him, Batman, Robin, and the Red Hood really lets one in on his killing abilities and relentless pursuit of justice. It details how much Flamingo pressed the heroes to their limits, but had to deal with such brutal and merciless acts. Flamingo is a skilled marksman and hand-to-hand fighter. His psychic conditioning further made him impervious to pain and fear, which enabled him to jump into battle without thinking twice about personal safety. Equipped with a wide variety of weapons like chain whips and submachine guns, he rides in various vehicles, the most normal of which seems to be a hot pink motorcycle. Flamingo's showy look, clad in bright pink and wearing a skull mask, contrasts dramatically with his darker character. With his distinctive appearance and style of operation, he's unlike any other adversary Batman has fought. This infamous character has gained the moniker the Eater of Faces, which refers to his vicious behavior in devouring the victims' faces after killing them. Now, if that's not dark, I don't know what is. Although Flamingo has made relatively few appearances, he's still such a grotesque and unpredictable piece of the Gotham criminal underworld that he thereby embeds himself in the Batman mythos. The TenEyed Man. The TenEyed Man is a rather weird yet special villain within Batman's roster of villains. His weird appearance and even stranger powers make him a peculiar character. First appearing in Batman issue 226 in 1970, created by Frank Robbins, Irv Novick, and Dick Giordano, today he's become a part of the exciting characters populating Batman's universe. Philip Reardon had been a security guard and a former veteran of the Vietnam War. One day, while confronting Batman during a warehouse fire, Reardon got caught in an explosion that ruined his optic nerves. A surgeon, Engstrom, reattached his optic nerves to his fingertips, allowing Reardon to see through his fingers and become the TenEyed Man. Fueled by a desire for revenge against Batman, whom he blamed for his condition, Reardon turned to a life of crime. The TenEyed Man makes a couple of appearances in the Batman comics, and most often he's used only to pose a minor threat or sometimes only as a subplot. Among his more memorable plots was his first encounter and his succeeding confrontations with Batman as he tries to exact revenge for an accident that changed his life. The core ability of the TenEyed Man is that he sees through his fingertips. Just the simple spreading of the hands allows him to see in every direction, giving quite the view in combat and sneaking situations. On the other hand, this makes him vulnerable to blinding methods targeted at his hands. He honed his combat skills to such an extent that he becomes a very good and skilled fighter, using his unusual vision to his advantage. The TenEyed Man signifies the surrealism and bizarreness of Batman's enemies, indicative of the innovative extremes to which the writers of Batman have gone in their efforts to challenge the Caped Crusader. This particular villain has become a cult favorite among fans of Batman's more obscure villains, though he's made only a few appearances. His character has been alluded to and remade in different forms on several occasions, proving once again the weird and unconventional within the Batman mythos. Clock King. The Clock King is a scrupulous and cunning fiend in the Batman Rogue Gallery, distinguished by his fixation with time and punctuality. There have been several different forms of the character, although Bill Finger and Sheldon Moldoff created the original in World's Finest Comics issue 111, released in 1960. His name was William Tockman. However, he was first and foremost a Green Arrow villain. Today, we'll talk about Temple Fugate, a new Clock King who was introduced in Batman the Animated Series as a nemesis of the Caped Crusader. Created by Sean McKeever and Eddie Burrows, Temple Fugate lived an obsessively clock-driven life, adhering to rigorous schedules. Being a time management consultant himself, he believed that if the timing was right, everything could be done effectively and on time. It was this very adherence to schedules that brought about financial ruin and a personal tragedy. What threw Temple Fugate off his routine was a chance encounter one day with then-Councilman Hamilton Hill, and what followed thereafter was a chain reaction of mishaps that turned him into a man filled with bitterness and vengeance, donning the persona of the Clock King to outsmart and discredit his enemies by using his special skills in planning and master time. Even without any superhuman powers, Clock King is a genius with near-superhuman intellect who has mastered time management, martial arts, and high-order strategy. He wields a variety of gadgets and different time-themed weapons, such as clock-shaped throwing stars and a cane that becomes a sword. He has an analytical mind and can therefore be pretty accurate at predicting and countering his enemies' moves. His crimes are very calculated, usually consisting of complex schemes calling for precision and the splitting of seconds. Although he's not that physically imposing compared to most of the other villains, his intellect powers and strategic mind set him apart as a singular character in the Batman mythos. Birthday Boy. One of the more off-putting and disturbing villains in Batman's catalogue of adversaries is the Birthday Boy. His 2012 introduction in Jeff Johns and Gary Frank's Batman Earth 1 added a grim, gritty character to the mythos, quite distinct from most of Batman's traditional rogues. In Earth 1, Ray Salinger, who would later turn out to be Birthday Boy, was introduced as a serial killer with the most daunting modus operandi. His killing career began when he murdered a 15-year-old girl named Amanda Grant. As a result, Salinger became infatuated with girls of Amanda's age. village, kidnapped them, and recreated his awful ritual. He would bind his victims, provide them with a birthday cake with Happy Birthday Amanda written on it, and tell them to make a wish, but not to tell anyone, and thereafter killed them. sAlGhul kept his victims' bodies in the basement of Arkham House. He was sent to the Crane Institute, where he was incarcerated for a short time, but broke out and started working for then Mayor Oswald Cobblepot. In return, sAlGhul was paid with young girls as Cobblepot's hitman, continuing his horrific pattern of crimes. His crimes within this narrative are gruesome and central to the plot, creating vast amounts of fear throughout Gotham. His actions don't affect just anyone in the city, but fuel Batman's quest to bring him to an end. The birthday boy relies on his strength and brutality. His colossal build and stamina make him a tough nut to crack in close combat. His planning of his celebrations and the ease with which he evades capture because of connections with Cobblepot prove how resourceful the man is. And the ritualistic pattern of the serial killer, combined with macabre birthday celebrations, creates a picture of pure disturbance that makes Birthday Boy stand out from more conventional villains. I hope that's the last of serial killers. Oh wait. Cornelius Sturk. Next up is another cannibalistic serial killer. Isn't that lovely? Cornelius Sturk is another lesser-known but far more interesting Batman villain. First introduced in 1988, he was created by Alan Grant and Norm Breyfogle and introduced in Detective Comics issue 592. Sturk is a cockney meta-human with the bizarre ability to change how people see him, to make himself appear as a comforting figure or one of the most horrifying. It's his way of luring Gotham's homeless into his lair, where he tortures them with the powers of induction of fear. Somehow, he believes that their hearts work as fuel, which he prepares in soup form and drinks to increase his strength, allowing him eternal life. Oh boy. Sturk's career in crime took off when, at 16, he was released from Arkham Asylum, where he'd been confined for trying to kill a fellow classmate. Certified sane, no doubt due to using his psychic powers on his doctors, Sturk soon stopped taking his medication and resumed killing. He targeted the homeless population of Gotham before he was apprehended by Batman and taken back to Arkham. During the Batman Nightfall storyline, Sturk joins forces with the Joker to abduct Commissioner Gordon. His intention, however, is to murder Gordon, which doesn't work within the Joker's plans. At the same time, Gordon imagines that Sturk is actually Batman, thereby heightening his level of terror in this encounter. Batman arrives at the scene and apprehends Sturk, but leaves Gordon in a frightened state, in desperate need of medical attention from his wife. Cornelius Sturk has many unsettling powers at his command. The mesmerist can project an aura that'll allow him to take on any face he desires, usually the face that engenders trust or comfort in poor souls to suffer his company. Sturk had the ability to create hallucinations with his mind, which was what made him most dangerous. He was able to set the pitch of agony in victims' minds. The added grotesqueness in his powers is when he believes that he needs to survive off of people's heart hormones, which he collects by putting fear into his victims before killing them. Like the Scarecrow, Sturk manipulates and disorients his victims using fear, but his powers also give him the ability to change his appearance at a whim. This power, to turn into somebody trusted or a nightmare, enhances the psychological parameters of his crimes, making him a uniquely frightening adversary in the dark world of Batman. BatOmbre, a light character, at last. BatOmbre is an unusual and quirky addition to Batman's gallery of baddies. Introduced in Batman issue 56 in 1949 by Dick Sprang and David Verne Reed, BatOmbre is one of the more obscure villains with an interesting twist on the common Batman adversary. Luis Peralta is from the fictional South American country of Mantegua. Originally a criminal associate of drug lord El Papayago, Luis was inspired by Batman and took it upon himself to create his own Bat-themed alter ego. As BatOmbre, he'd act as a vigilante that actually worked for Papayago, thwarting the authorities. After an attempt on the president of Mantegua's life, Batman and Robin were called in to train BatOmbre, but didn't realize he'd allied with El Papayago. While training him, the dynamic duo furnished BatOmbre with a utility belt in the image of a bat and fitted him with several gadgets. His true allegiance was revealed by Papayago's parrot, exposing his treachery. In the subsequent battle, Batman and Robin defeat BatOmbre as he tried to use his new gadgets to get away and kill the president. He was ultimately foiled by Batman and fell off a cliff to his presumed death. The utility belt the dynamic duo made for him contained practical tools like explosives, a bat radio, and a whip. He also rode on his bat horse. These gadgets, combined with combat training, definitely made him a tough opponent, though his true ability shined in areas such as deception and manipulation of his image. The tale of BatOmbre substantiates all the convolutions of double identities and how difficult it is to recognize a real hero from a lot of fakes. During this short but memorable appearance, he adds an international intrigue to Batman's adventures and precisely explains how far in reality Dark Knight stretches within and outside Gotham. The Condiment King. The Condiment King is one of the more recognizable comic characters in the Batman realm. He was created as a parody of the campier villains of the Silver Age of comics, or the 1960s TV series of Batman. He first appeared in an episode of Batman the Animated Series titled Make 'em Laugh, with the character created by Bruce Timm and Paul Dini. Voiced by Stuart Pankin, this character embodies all of the ridiculousness associated with campy supervillains through his gimmicky condiment-themed crimes. The Condiment King, whose secret civilian identity is Buddy Standler, first earned a living as a stand-up comic. His life went downhill when the Joker brainwashed him into committing truly petty crimes related to condiments. In the animated debut, Standler is seen sipping on ketchup during a rooftop run with Batman. He falls in a very comedic, nearly fatal way. This episode highlights his role as comic relief, contrasting sharply with more menacing villains. The Condiment King reappears in the comic book Batgirl, Year 1 by Chuck Dixon and Scott Beatty. And just like in the animated series, he's a comic relief who Robin and Batgirl easily defeat. He also appears in Birds of Prey issue 37, where a team including Black Canary, the Third Robin, and Blue Beetle defeats him. His alter ego in the comics is Mitchell Mayo. The Condiment King doesn't possess any superhuman powers, but relies on his collection of condiment-based gizmos. Among them, his major gadgets are the condiment guns, which are basically squirt guns hooked up to belts or backpacks with different sources. They're usually non-lethal, although they were used in various ways, as they could be utilized to make targets slip, ricochet, or even fly across the room. The hot sauce packets themselves are used at close range by squeezing them into an opponent's mouth to overwhelm them with the sauce's intense heat. He also has a utility belt, which carries an assortment of condiments that rivaled Batman's utility belt in terms of variety of garnishes, but definitely not in functionality. This Condiment King character provides comic relief against most of Batman's dark and grim villains. He takes on the more showy and campy villains of earlier eras with parodic comic relief, underscoring the creativity in Batman's wide rogues gallery. Calculator. The Calculator, whose real name is Noah Cutler, was first introduced in Detective Comics issue 463 back in the year 1976. He was a criminal genius and master strategist who had a real knack for numbers. The character was created by Bob Rozakis and Mike Grell. This supervillain first donned the crime career traveling from state to state, fighting various superheroes. Calculator donned a high-tech battlesuit with an analysis and recording system that'd give him experience whenever he was defeated, so no hero could get the better of him twice. He battled many heroes, including Batman and the Atom, before receiving 9 consecutive life sentences. Calculator began his career as an oracle to supervillains right after breaking out of prison. He got most of his information from tales of Oracle and through personal encounters with other supervillains. He literally pieced it all together and wired up a pretty amazing information network and resource bank. The Calculator's involvement in underworld scenes escalated when he himself became a member of the secret society of supervillains. He'd soon worked with Alexander Luthor of Earth 3 and the more mainstream Lex Luthor in concocting major operations such as a worldwide jailbreak and an attack on Metropolis. Once again, the latter was foiled by the ad hoc alliance of superheroes. Double-crossed by Lex Luthor, who imposed a harsh punishment on him, the Calculator was finally released by Luthor. The Calculator boasts a genius-level intellect and strategist, making him a dangerous enemy. The original suit may have been long gone. You know, the one fitted with a large calculator that could predict actions and create items out of dust. But his mind for manipulation, strategy, and criminal networking remains immense. He has sundry sources of technology in his far-reaching roots of villainous networking. The shift of the Calculator from a technology-driven villain to that of a mastermind identifies his adaptability and greatness of mind. The different roles that he played in these criminal organizations, coupled with his interactions with heroes and villains, makes his impact on the DC universe overwhelming, squarely cementing the importance of his high-caliber adversarial status. Marvelous verdict. That's it for today, guys. Having cruised through the annals of Batman's rogues gallery, it'd be obvious to state that Gotham City is a fertile breeding ground for so many of the most peculiar and warped villains ever seen within the pages of comic books. These antagonists challenge the Dark Knight in ways that go beyond physical confrontations, pushing Batman to his intellectual and moral limits. Although most of these characters linger at the edges of public consciousness, this doesn't make them any less integral to the rich tapestry that makes Batman's world so compelling. Which underrated villain did you find to be the most fascinating? Let us know in the comment section below. If you like this video, well, remember to hit the like button and share it with all your Bat friends, and I'll see you in the next one.